Good evening, everyone. It now being 7:32 on Monday, March 28th of 2022. We're beginning the meeting of this committee on ordinance and rules. As we are still appearing via Zoom here, all votes will be by roll call. Anyone wishing to speak, please use the raise hand function. It doesn't seem like we have an overabundance of people attending. I can see most people, so you can also try to give me a wave. Clerk Semino, can we please have a roll call to begin the meeting?
Yes. Councilor Ringus?
Aye, we're present.
Councilor Hume?
Here.
Councilor Flaherty?
Here.
Councilor Ryan?
Here.
All present.
Thank you, Clerk Semino. Moving on to our approval of minutes of our December 7th, 2021 meeting, as well as our December 13th, 2021 meeting. We have veteran councilors here, but just as a reminder, and for those watching, one need not have attended or been involved in that meeting so long as one trusts in the way that the minutes were recorded. We have had sort of a reconstituted ordinance and rules where I believe myself and Councilor Flaherty are the only two remaining members from December 7th and December 13th. With that said, do I have a motion to approve the minutes of December 7th, 2021 and December 13th of 2021?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion by Vice President Hume. I have a second by Councilor Ryan. Clerk Semino, can we have a roll call vote?
Councilor Ringus?
Aye.
Councilor Hume?
Aye.
Councilor Flaherty?
Aye.
Councilor Ryan?
Aye.
4 in favor, 0 opposed.
Thank you, Clerk Semino, and that is unanimous. Moving on to old business, we have 2 items on our agenda under old business today that are really just going to be quick updates. So if I could have a motion to take off the table order 20034, Councilor O'Brien 8.800, single-use plastic bag reduction bylaw, or any action related thereto.
Motion to take off the table order 20034.
Second.
I have a motion from Councilor Hume, a second from Councilor Ryan. Clerk Semino, can we have a roll call vote?
Councilor Ringus?
Aye.
Councilor Hume?
Aye.
Councilor Flaherty?
Aye.
Councilor Ryan?
Aye.
4 in favor, 0 opposed.
And that is unanimous. Thank you, Clerk Semino. Just as an update on this, I know we have some new members to our Ordinance and Rules subcommittee. This is a proposal from a District 4 Councilor O'Brien. This was initially proposed to Ordinance and Rules prior to COVID coming into play. During COVID, this sort of got moved to sort of the back burner because based on some of the executive actions that the governor took, you could not use reusable bags during the pendency of COVID. That was since lifted when many of the COVID restrictions were lifted, and we sort of came back into sort of approaching this. The full council had a very nice presentation from a group of Girl Scouts who had looked into sort of this as one of their projects. And we've had a few meetings on this in ONR. At previous meetings from ONR, we have heard from Kim Croha, who is the president of the Braintree Chamber of Commerce. We've heard from Rachel Horak and Michael Kavanaugh from Sustainable Braintree. We've heard from Crystal Evans, who is a member of our Commission on Disabilities. We also have received an email from Senator Keenan's office. This is a proposal that continually sort of floats its way up into Beacon Hill, but continually kind of falls by the wayside, doesn't ever get acted on. So we had asked our legislative delegation to provide us some update. All the members of Ordinance and Rules should have received those materials. Clerk Semino, is that accurate?
I'm sorry, I apologize. I was reading a
That's okay.
message that was coming into me.
So all
Your last
the
question?
materials from previous meetings have been distributed to the councilors?
Yes, absolutely. Yep.
The only real update that we have is pursuant to one of our last ONR meetings, the Commission on Disabilities was also looking at this. We had a very sort of robust conversation in regards to not only how this impacts the environment, but how this impacts some of the folks in town who might be mobility impaired, and how the use of certain bags could be difficult for some of our elderly citizens to use, and the costs associated with some of those bags that might sort of an undue burden on people. So there's definitely an environmental impact that we're going to look at with a proposal like this, but we also have to see how it's going to affect sort of our disabled community as they sort of continue to do their shopping. So I know there was a very robust conversation at the last two Committee on Disability meetings, and I know that they're trying to work with Sustainable Braintree in coming up with some amendments in ways that we could sort of reflect the environmental impact and also be cognizant of some of those folks in the Commission on Disabilities. And I know there's still some language being worked on. I believe Councilor Flaherty, you had some insight into that. I didn't know if there's anything that you wanted to add in terms of that.
I had been in touch with the folks at Sustainable Braintree and the Council on Disabilities kind of following their conversation. And it became clear that there was some interest in different ways of managing the reduction bylaw. And they didn't necessarily agree with one another. So I have spoken since then to the Chamber of Commerce, because the Chamber of Commerce provided us with a letter initially in response to the original draft, and that letter was split. And therefore, well, the opinion on the Chamber was neutral, and as a consequence, but the opinion on the Chamber was split, and so their recommendation was neutrality. So I spoke to them somewhat on the suggestions made by Sustainable Braintree and also the suggestions on by the Council on Disabilities, and they were receptive to those ideas. I don't know if it shifted their point of view or not, but I thought it was worth soliciting their feedback on a changed kind of landscape. So I think that they're willing to be kind of patient and wait and see what the Council on Disability comes up with and what the Sustainable Braintree proposes, and sort of listen to those ideas and provide further feedback when the time comes.
Thank you for your work on that, Councilor Flaherty, and sort of keeping involved. So from tonight's perspective, if it fits with the will of the other members of the subcommittee here, it would just be, I think, most prudent just to table this to a future date to continue to review the materials. I know that there are going to be further recommendations coming from the Commission on Disabilities and from Sustainable Braintree, and we'll have to have those obviously reviewed at some point by town council, our town solicitor as well. So my recommendation tonight would just be, based on the update we've just been sort of heard about, is just to table this to a future date.
Motion to table order 20034. Mr. Chair.
Second.
I have a motion for Councilor Hume. I have a second by Councilor Ryan. Clerk Semino, can we have a roll call vote?
Councilor Ryan, I'm sorry, Councilor Ringus, apologize.
Aye.
Councilor Hume,
Aye.
Councilor Flaherty,
Aye.
Councilor Ryan.
Aye.
That's 4 in favor, 0 opposed.
That is unanimous. Thank you, Clerk Semino. The next item is again old business, just an update on sort of something that's being worked on, and that is 00221. Councilor Shasha, Councilor Connors, or former Councilor Shasha, former Councilor Connors, amendment to bylaw section 135-1101, or taking up any action relative thereto. Do I have a motion to take that off the table?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion from Councilor Hume, a second from Councilor Flaherty. Clerk Semino, can I have a roll call vote?
Councilor Ringus,
Aye.
Councilor Hume,
Aye.
Councilor Flaherty,
Aye.
Councilor Ryan,
Aye.
4 in favor, 0 opposed.
The update here is this is a proposal that former District 2 and former District 3 councilors Shasha and Connors had proposed. This is something that they were working kind of hand in hand with the mayor's office on. I had talked to our town solicitor earlier today. I believe that assistant solicitor rather, Huff, and former Councilor Shasha are still discussing this with the mayor's office. They're working on the language currently, and there is some hope that with slight changes to an existing bylaw, that we might not actually have to act on this. So I think they may be able to sort of get to sort of what they wanted to achieve without us sort of acting on 00221. So we're just waiting to hear from the mayor's office and the town solicitor's office as to where we stand on that. And that is something we will also take up at a further meeting. For those new to O&R, all of these materials should have been provided to you as well. I know many of them were in the packet today. So with that said, I would just ask for us table this to a future meeting.
Motion to table item 00221.
Second.
I have a motion from Councilor Hume. I have a second from Councilor Ryan. Clerk Semino, can I have a roll call vote?
Counselor Ringus,
Aye.
Counselor Hume,
Aye.
Counselor Flaherty,
Aye.
Counselor Ryan.
Aye.
4 in favor, 0 opposed.
That is unanimous. Moving on to new business. 22011 Landing Apartments LLC zoning petition, amendment to the table of principal uses, section 135-601, or take up any action relative thereto. With that said, I know we have a few folks present with us tonight in regards to this. Frank Marinelli is with us, and I believe he's going to have a short presentation as counsel for the proponents here. I know that Melissa Santucci-Razzi of our planning department is also in attendance, and she'll have an update on, I believe, the planning board's recommendations as to this. So with that said, I would ask Attorney Marinelli, how are you doing?
Good evening, Chairperson Ringus. Nice to see you and all of the members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to address the committee. For the record, Frank Marinelli, and I'm pleased to appear this evening on behalf of Landing Apartments. And tonight, along with the planning board and citizens as petitioners, we seek the committee's favorable recommendation to revise the principal use table, as the chairperson read, to allow veterinary use by special permit. Landing Apartments was approved in 2015 by the planning board, and that includes the 12,000 square feet of commercial space. And following construction, all of the apartment homes leased quickly. What languished and what happens customarily, typically in mixed use developments, is that the commercial space is slow to rent. And that has a lot to do with people purchasing online, and you have to locate services that will fill the vacant commercial space, which of course we don't want to see a lot of in Braintree. So after 4+ years with the commercial space was leased to Rivershed Restaurant and to Keller Williams, and that leaves 3,000 of built out brand new space vacant. I'm joined tonight by Christy DeAndrea, and Christy has her doctorate in veterinary medicine from Tufts University. Christy and her business, Veterinary Urgent Care Center, VUCC, seek to lease the remaining 3,000 square feet of first floor commercial space at Landing 53. Also here is Josh Katzen, who is manager of Landing Apartments LLC, the owner of Landing 53. In the petition materials, Mr. Chairman, you have Christy's curriculum vitae, which references her broad experience and accomplishments in her profession and veterinary-related articles that she's authored. As a woman professional in business, she founded VUCC in 2017, and she has grown the business to 3 locations: Quincy, which this location would replace, Northeastern, and Plymouth. VUCC provides fast, effective relief for common pet illnesses and injuries, primarily dogs and cats. You can go online to veturgentcare.com and you can see everything about Christie's urgent care business. VUCC is the type of quality business that Braintree welcomes. And Christie seeks to move, as I said, from 291 Quincy Avenue, which is in Quincy about a mile up the road beyond the Roach Brothers supermarket on Quincy Avenue. And she seeks to lease, as I've said, the remaining 3,000 square feet. The small business will be a positive addition to the Landing community. In addition to a broader community need, a significant percentage of the 172 apartment residences at Landing 53 have pets. And the proposed VUCC commercial space is located in the new district that was created a few years ago to encourage residential development to support small businesses. And that's in the purpose of the Landing District, the BWLD, Section 615, creating residential density to support small businesses like Christie's. Currently, by comparison, there are other uses by right that we would submit respectfully, and the planning board agreed, and certainly the citizen petition that are far more intense than what we're proposing here. For example, a medical clinic can be allowed by special permit from the planning board, yet this would not be without the revision that we're requesting. Further, animal retail grooming service, which was approved by the council in June of last year, is allowed by right in the BWLD. That is more intensely patronized than an emergency care small clinic, which is the use before that we're proposing be adopted as a special permit in the use table. So the sole request is to make a minor adjustment to the principal use table, section 601, as the chairperson read, to enable veterinary clinic to locate by special permit in the BWLD. With this adjustment, VUCC and the owner, Landing Apartments, are simply asking for an opportunity to proceed to the planning board for a special permit public hearing process. And in that special permit process, as we're all aware, all of the operational components are addressed and assured by the planning board special permit conditions. And that includes things like parking. Sometimes parking receives some attention. This proposal, Landing 53, was approved, including all of the commercial space, and the parking requirements were met for the entire development, including this 3,000 square feet. All of those parking requirements in the Landing District were met for this project. And in support of the petition, you have in your materials 959 signatories of people that are highly recommending Christie and her business. Under Chapter 40A, we also have the registered voters who are allowed to petition for the minor adjustment, and there are 2 pages of just Braintree petitioners. And also, the committee has the votes of the planning board in February unanimously to co-sponsor this minor adjustment. And again, the unanimous vote of the planning board in March to favorably recommend the petition to the council. So as I've said, this would be the first tenant for this new but vacant commercial space, which has existed since shortly after the approval in 2015. We've also given the committee the proposed layout. You can see everything that we're going to propose to the planning board in terms of the floor plan. We've been completely transparent in everything, including what it will look like when it's built out. And it's a small facility by comparison, and nobody should be misled as to any kind of intensity. This is a small operation in a small plaza, a mile up the road right now. But by comparison, the veterinary hospital on Columbian Street is about 10 times the size of this proposal. That hospital is close to 30,000 square feet. This is 3,000 square feet of space that would be rented. It's drop off, pick up. Chrissy can speak to that. Excuse me, it creates a very good synergy with the Landing District, whose purpose is to have a vibrant community, a vibrant landing area. And obviously, the investment that was made by Mr. Katzen and the investment in Landing Apartments, over $50 million, really spurred a lot of the other development in residences that are appropriate for a transit-oriented district, which is exactly what the purpose of the BWLD is. It's basically complementing the tens of millions of dollars that have been invested in commuter rail down in that area. So this is a woman-founded business with relatively modest space, 3,000 square feet, and we would be happy to answer any questions that the committee may have. I did send you photos that were taken today at 1 o'clock. And what they show is about 20 spaces that are available in the very back of the Landing Apartments. It shows about 28 of the 183 parking spaces in the large commercial lot on the Weymouth side, occupied, over 150 vacant asphalt. On the Braintree side, on the Quincy Avenue parking lot, on the MBTA parking lot, 10 of the approximate 85 spaces were occupied. So people's travel habits are not the same as they were in terms of peak hours and parking and so forth. And again, this proposal, this build out of landing apartments met all of the requirements. There's a decision of about 81 or more conditions back in 2015. And if you review that, you'll see that that decision is complied with in terms of all of the parking and the anticipated number of spaces required for this 3,000 square feet. So again, we're happy to answer any questions, and thank you for the opportunity to appear before the committee.
Thank you, Attorney Marinelli, for that sort of thorough presentation. Thank you, Ms. DeAndrea and Mr. Katzen, for being here as well and being open to questions if the committee may have some. Before I open it up to members of the committee for questions, I would just first turn to Ms. Santucci-Razzi, just so we can get a little bit of feedback on the planning board and their decision.
Evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. So I did provide for the O&R committee this afternoon a planning board report. The planning board did conduct a public hearing on this particular zoning amendment on March 8th. There was limited discussion that is captured in the report. I also provided, we did have a draft of the minutes available, so I figured that was a little more context. And also have provided that in draft format for the members as well. In addition, I've provided the parking table analysis for the Landing 53 mixed use development provided from Mr. Katzen, which in fact demonstrates that the breakdown of parking for the uses that are there, and also documenting that there are additional spaces in accordance with the ordinance requirements for parking that would in fact meet compliance for the this proposed use at that location. And then also the condition that was required in the approval in 2015 that Attorney Marinelli spoke about, related to the spaces that need to be available in excess of any spaces dedicated to a particular use in that building, and that is condition 29 of the special permit. So the discussion again was fairly brief at the planning board. The parking was discussed very briefly. The planning board also received a letter from Mayor Hadland. I know there was also one forwarded to Chairman Ringus as well, with a variety of questions. And the answer to those questions are both in the report and also in the supplemental materials provided to the committee. So the planning board, again, had a pretty brief discussion. There was nobody from the public that attended the public hearing. And the planning board made a favorable recommendation. And part of the discussion included that this particular use and the detailed review of the parking will be conducted during the public hearing for the special permit, if this is in fact passed as a zoning amendment. And I would just like to remind the members of the committee and those in attendance this evening that the parking requirements detailed out in the ordinance are the minimum of parking requirements. So if this is in fact passed by the council as an amendment, and Ms. DeAndrea or anybody for that matter pursues a special permit in the Braintree Weymouth Landing District, a deep dive to the parking compliance and actual needs of that particular business will be reviewed in detail and can be conditioned as deemed appropriate by the planning board and those members concerned from the public. So the recommendation was to support the amendment. I know that there has been some questions related to parking, hence trying to provide as much information for the committee this evening to hopefully satisfy some of those questions. And I'm available to answer any other additional questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Santucci-Razzi, for that report. The last thing that I'll do before opening it up is there was a letter referenced from Mayor Headland's office, and I believe that they've asked that to be read into the record. The copy of the letter that I have is dated March 25th, 2022, and addressed to me. I noted that in our packet, we did have a letter from March 1st that was addressed to the chairwoman of the planning board, Ms. Joyce. But by this letter, March 25th, 2022, dear Councilor Ringus, I'm writing as a follow-up to my letter of March 1st, 2022, to which I have yet to receive a response. In that letter, I expressed concern over the proposed amendment 22011 to the Braintree zoning ordinance that would add animal clinics or hospitals to the table of principal uses governing the Weymouth Landing area. As you are aware, parking in Weymouth Landing has increasingly become an issue as a result of the redevelopment activity in the area. Weymouth is working to manage and increase municipal parking spots in conjunction with the Delagas redevelopment project, which abuts the area of the proposed zoning change, but are limited in the number of new public spaces that can be created. From the content of the citizens petition, we are aware that this request specifically relates to the addition of a 3,000 square foot veterinary urgent care center within the Landing 53 mixed use development. Given this knowledge, I expect that the proposed zoning change will be reviewed with the specific needs of that development in mind. Those needs include providing the required number of parking spaces, as well as ensuring safe pedestrian and automotive access for pickups and drop-offs of both people and their pets. I again ask whether the planning board or town council have received a parking plan for the proposal. Per your zoning, how many parking spaces are required for a 3,000 square foot clinic? Where are those spaces to be located? Please provide any additional details that you may have so that we can better understand the project and potential impacts to our mutual interests in Weymouth Landing. I look forward to continuing working with the town of Braintree with the mutual goal of creating a vibrant live-work community in Weymouth Landing. Sincerely, Robert Headland, Mayor of the town of Weymouth. The only thing I would note is that Mayor Headland should check with his staff before including certain paragraphs and letters. He addresses that there was a letter sent to me on March 1st of 2022, which is incorrect and was never sent to me. So perhaps getting that in order before making any sort of accusation there. With that said, I would open it up to members of O&R that may have questions for either Ms. Santucci-Razzi, Attorney Marinelli, Mr. Katzen, or Ms. DeAndrea. And I think Councilor Hume, I saw your hand first.
Thank you, Chairman Ringus. Thank you all for being here tonight. I do understand that this is, you're looking for an amendment to the table of principal uses and that the parking requirements have been met. But I have a big concern for the parking because the parking that's there now is not sufficient. It's not sufficient for the residents, the businesses, the customers. I've heard from visiting nurse that goes there during the day that has issues with it. And correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is as it is now, residents of Landing 53 who live there are guaranteed one spot underneath. And the fee for that is $75 per month. And they can get a spot out back. They need to get a permit from the management office. And those are limited hours. There's actually two signs, one on top of each other out back. One sign says parking 3 hours, public parking, 8 a.m. to 1 a.m. And then just under that, there's another sign, public parking 3 hour limit, 8 a.m. 8 a.m. to 1 a.m. Landing 53 residents permit parking 11:30 p.m. to 9 a.m. So the 9 a.m. is where it becomes an issue for the residents. And I've had residents reach out to me on this. You have residents who maybe on the weekends are not out at 9 a.m. And this is an issue for commuters of the residents who commute here. If they're commuting, they're leaving their car there. And if they only have the one parking spot underneath and then are parking outside, where are they supposed to park? And I know some residents have been told who've been in that situation. So I know the requirements are met, but I don't think it's enough. And when this project was first approved, it was transit-oriented development. There's going to be one car in it because everyone's going to be taking the train. And I don't think, and I know that's not the situation in a lot of cases. There's two vehicles. So I know, thank you, Melissa, I think you sent this today. It's 12 spaces that are required for this, and this has nothing to do with the small business that's coming. I thank you for wanting to come to Braintree. I welcome small businesses. I think small businesses are what makes Braintree great and keeps us that small town feel, and it's a huge asset to our community to bring the small businesses into our community. So this is nothing against. I want to take care of the current residents, the current businesses. We need to straighten out and get clear on the current parking situation because it's not good. So again, if I have any of this wrong, feel free, please correct me, but the 12 spaces for the VUCC, where will they be? And what additional parking is proposed?
So I'll answer first and then Josh can contribute. But
Sorry, Mark.
the requirement of the bylaw, so the rule of law is 0.8 spaces per residence, per apartment. So we have a 198 car garage at Landing Apartments. The requirement for the residences is 138. I'm sorry, it's 196 car garage. And respectfully, we're getting way into the things that would be addressed in the special permit process, because this is just a policy question about a use and a revision to the table. We have said that we will address all of the details in the operational plan in the special permit process. But to address the question, I would refer you also to the fact that there are restaurants, there are coffee shops on the Weymouth side as well, that we believe are more impactful. There are uses of right that are more impactful. As far as our project, which is what we're required to provide parking for, we have provided all of the parking that is required, and that's set out in decision 15-11. So if there is, anecdotally other things where, people have had issues parking at certain times of day, that is a broader area issue. But I can tell you, I live probably a mile from the landing. I do a lot of walking. I walk down there. I check on the development that's going on around the area. And even when I drive, I haven't had a problem parking on Commercial Street. And today, on our specific project in the back, again, and we have enough spaces to comply with this. Keep in mind, this is built out space. This is already approved space. We're not, I noticed in the letter from the mayor, the other mayor, that it talks about addition of 3,000 square feet, addition of a 3,000 square. This is not an addition. This is an approved space. This is, and it's, again, less impactful in our view than medical clinic for people, which is allowed by special permit, use by right for doggy daycare, which was passed by the council in June. So, we can take care of what we have to, and we have more than enough parking under the bylaw. As far as, not finding a space at a particular time, I don't know whether that's hit or miss or what it is, in terms of the example that you cited, that somebody couldn't get a space. Today at 1 p.m., and I tried to provide recent evidence, the very day of your hearing, and there were 20 spaces in back of Landing 53 in the 46 space surface parking lot, which goes along with the 196 space garage. And there were 28 cars in the 183 space MBTA lot. There were 10 cars in the 85 space MBTA lot. So, there's a lot of parking down there, and there's a lot of unused parking. As far as our site is concerned and our approval is concerned, we comply, and this was submitted by the applicant in conjunction with the hearings, the grid that was provided to show compliance with all of the uses.
Councilor Hume, you still have the floor.
Thank you, Attorney Marinelli. I appreciate the comments and the feedback, and I understand you're within the requirements. And in terms of pictures, like today, it was a Monday. Has any pictures or
Yeah, I have pictures going back to November. It's not a holiday. I mean, it's a business day, and I have the same types of pictures going back to November that Ms. Santucci has when we first started this, and with significant vacancies in these lots.
So at night and on the weekends as well? Same time, or you're taking them during the day? Because here's what I've also heard residents, that they're not parking there because they've been towed. So they're getting a ride to family, friends, whoever who live parking at their home because they've been towed. There's 2 people in their residence at Landing 53 who have vehicles and can't park both of them there. And if they're a commuter, like what's being addressed for commuters? If they have one spot underneath, maybe both are commuters. I don't know all the details. Like, have you gotten feedback? Like, is there, like, I'd love to hear if there is. You're saying you're going to talk about
Well,
parking.
I mean, Mr.
Hold on a second, please. You're going to talk about parking in it, you know, when it comes before the special permit, but you're.
Yeah, well, this is not a policy matter. It's the mechanics and the operational platform of this particular small business. I'll let Mr. Katzen answer any critique, and these are criticisms of a place that is in compliance. But, you know, I don't know what the example is and the enthusiasm or just you know, just the person that you spoke to being upset. But it's one example. I don't know, you know, how we're supposed to, in reverse, retrofit our complying project because of an example. Obviously, somebody has spoken very vehemently to you about something, and I'm sorry that there was some kind of incident, but I don't think it defines what is the best judgment for filling vacant space. That's, you know, it's been constructed and has been in existence for 4+ years. It's all approved, and you can have significantly more intense uses by right in that space than Christie's proposed emergency only, you know, dog and cat clinic, which she can provide more details about her operation. I don't think it has a lot of parking. Actually, Counselor, if you were to go to her site up past the Roach Brothers Drive in Quincy, it's a small plaza on the left-hand side, and you can see that she doesn't have a lot of parking requirements. And I've been by there. I've taken pictures of it. It's a small parking lot, and there are empty spaces where she is right now. So she's not going to be the cause of anything. In fact, as I've said repeatedly, there are uses by right now on the Braintree side and the Weymouth side that might create more impact. But your choice is to leave the space vacant, and I don't think that's a responsible position for a commercial venue that's been approved with all of the requirements met under decision 15-11. Josh, do you have anything that perhaps the committee would allow you to add?
Sure. Thank you, Frank.
Mr. Katzen?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Councilor Hume, you raise very important issues that have been the subject of conversation since this project was approved. We've been trying, and it started work with the previous mayor, with Mayor Sullivan. We've been trying to balance the needs of the residents against the needs of the community, because you'll recall that the parking lot used to be a municipal parking lot owned by the town of Braintree. And when we bought it from the town in order to make the apartment house go forward, there was significant concern that the public would be denied access to the municipal parking lot and that we would only use it for the residents. Mm-hmm. So the argument in favor of the residents you made, some of them have an extra car, and after, you know, there's just not enough room for every resident to have 2 cars parked inside. But the argument in favor of the community was, let's keep that lot available so that it can serve the entire landing. And there were a lot of conversations back and forth on limitation on how long people could park there. There was a pretty well agreed upon position that commuters should not be allowed to park there all day long. That would tie up a space that neither a resident nor a potential customer could use. So we went back and forth with Mayor Sullivan. Should it be a 2-hour limit or a 3-hour limit? Currently, it's 3 hours. It used to be 2 hours. But you're right to raise it. It's an ongoing push and pull between two competing interests. Now, fortunately, as Attorney Marinelli points out, the MBTA lot, both of those two lots are dramatically underutilized now since ridership on the Greenbush line has gone down. And that presents a real opportunity for us to spread some of the parking requirements. Another thing that's been going on is that the Lagos building in Weymouth has been under construction for over 2 years. And the parking lot that is behind Landing 53 is supposed to be quite a bit larger. Originally, before the Lagos project started, the municipal lot spanned both Weymouth and Braintree. The Weymouth section has been out of commission for 2 years, and that's about to come back online. So we're going to get a shot in the arm on some more local parking because the arrangements between the towns are that people can park back and forth between the two. But given the interest in how to solve this parking problem, I think that the town is better off having a special permit use in that space than an as of right use. Because if you allow Christie's use to go forward, we have to go to the planning board, and that will give the planning board an opportunity to revisit these issues and to talk with us about how to reassess or reallocate some of those parking spaces. If we just go in as of right with another restaurant or an office, then the planning board will never get an opportunity to have that conversation. So I think it's probably an overall positive for you to encourage a special permit use that gives you a shot. The final thing is, and I think Christy can address this, I hope she'll speak soon, employee parking can be dealt with. We can move employees over to the MBTA lot. The cost of parking there is not extensive. And I think I'd like to turn it over to Christy to ask her to address that as well as other things. You're muted, Christy.
I'm aware, but some others had their hands up before mine, so I'm happy to address it. So to Frank's point and to Josh's, if I may, it sounds like my understanding is there are a number of businesses that are already allowed by right, and it would be in the best interest of the town of Braintree to have a good business in there that brings a lot to the community. I'm very confident that my business offers that. You may not know this, but our current site only has 8 parking spaces, which includes employee parking. And we've managed that by mainly using the drop-off feature. A lot of clients will just drop their pets off with us. So they're not there for an extended period of time at all. The employees can park anywhere. They can park in the commuter lot. Josh and I can certainly address this, but our parking needs are pretty minimal. And it sounds like you guys, it's in everyone's best interest to have a business in there. And it just seems like it would be prudent to choose a business where the parking is minimal, even though it is a special permit process, revisit it as suggested by Josh, as opposed to something that's allowed by right. Josh could put a medical clinic in there and the parking demands would be much larger than ours. But I'm pleased to answer any other questions that you guys might have. I don't, need to be verbose about it, but to me, it seems like our needs are not that great. However, I do understand that Weymouth Landing is a generally challenging issue with regard to parking. And, we're more than happy to work with the community to figure out, how we can best provide solutions. I know maybe it's not a valid suggestion, but I'm happy to provide, payment receipts or a small, contribution towards the commuter lot. I don't want to jump into that, but, I'm happy to try and work with commuter rail or however else we can to sort of mitigate this issue in your community. Can I answer any other questions?
At this point, I'm just going to hold off, Ms. DeAndrea. I know that Councilor Flaherty, I see that your hand is up, and when Councilor Hume yields the floor, you'll be the first up to ask your questions. I know that Ms. Santucci-Razzi has her hand up, and I think she was going to respond to one of Councilor Hume's questions, so I do want to hear from her first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I actually wasn't going to respond, but I would like to also ask a question that I think might be helpful in the discussion, and that's to Mr. Katzen, if I may. And my question is the garage accessible to people besides the residents? Can you drive into the garage?
You can't drive into the garage unless you have a fob. And
Okay.
The only people using the garage at this point are the residents and some of the employees of Keller Williams for security purposes, because there's direct access from the garage into the apartments.
Yeah, so I think that, and again, I'm not trying to turn this into a parking hearing, but everybody has the table that was provided. And we have 196 spaces in the garage and we have 46 outside. And 35 is supposed to be available to the public as part of the remaining municipal lot in the back there. So if you take the 35 off the 242, you're left with 207. And there's no way that what is outside remaining beyond the 35 is sufficient to meet the requirement of all of these uses. So if the people going to the restaurant and the people in the sort of the calculations that you have under retail, Mr. Katzen, can't access the garage, I think that's what the problem is. Because the numbers just don't work if they can't physically get to those spaces. And I think that's, there's ways to restrict portions of the garage and there's ways to kind of make those spaces available. I've been involved with projects where there is a garage, there's a gate that comes down so that the access to the units is closed off. But that's my first question. And my second question is, how many spaces are allocated to tenants in lease agreements?
Okay, so in answer to your first question, Ms. Antoniozzi, the 35 spaces are available to the public, but they are available also to customers, and they're available to be used against the zoning count. They're not taken off the table for the use of our tenants, our retail tenants, because the public has access. It's the other way around. We have the use of those spaces to satisfy our zoning requirements and for the use of the customers. And at the same time, we're allowing the public in general to use those spaces when they want to. It's the inverse of what you said.
Well, that makes even less sense because then you're
The
not.
special permit requires us not to cut off the parking lot from the public, but it doesn't say that allowing the public access to the parking lot means that we don't have the use of those spaces. We're not cut off from them.
But use of them and using them to meet your zoning compliance are two different things. And I apologize if people are like, why is she asking these questions? I didn't work on this project when it was permitted, so I don't have that deep level of detail and knowledge that people are used to seeing me provide. And I'm really trying to figure this out because if there's X amount for the units based on zoning and there's X amount for the various uses, and then there's 35, the 35 shouldn't be part of some uses zoning compliance. And if it is,
Yeah.
then
I would suggest that this is an interesting conversation. It's a close analysis of how the special permit was put together. And I'm happy to work on it with you and happy to even discuss possible outcomes. I suppose the proper venue for that would be the planning board if we get that far. If the table is amended to allow us to get there.
And I think you make a good point, Mr. Katz, so I'm going to stop you there because I don't want this to continue to devolve into a parking conversation because really ordinance and rules, that's not what we're dealing with per se. Councilor Hume has some concerns which I think are relevant, but some of the issues we're starting to delve into are slightly off course of what we're looking at in terms of policy and the actual zoning piece. So I think you do have some conversation to have offline or in a different venue. But before I move to Councilor Flaherty, Councilor Hume, did you have any sort of further questions while you still have the floor or comments that you wanted to make?
I do. Thank you, Chairman Ringus. And just to clarify, it wasn't just one resident I've heard from. I've heard from multiple residents who live at Landon 53, and I've heard from multiple residents just within the community accessing various businesses and whatnot. And as you said, Mr. Katzen, this has been a parking issue since Mayor Sullivan. This goes back a long, long time. So this is nothing new. Signage has changed over the year. At one point it said residents, but couldn't park. Anyway, so I understand, and again, I'm going to correct something here. Commuters were not supposed to be parking there, but for the residents of Landing 53 who live there and happen to be a commuter and have two cars, how is that issue addressed? Has that been discussed?
Well, it's really worked out on an individual basis. Almost 1.5 of, every unit has one space, and 50 out of another third or so have 2 spaces. The hope was that by living next to a commuter rail, people would rely less on cars. It's an environmental and a social and an intensity proposal. I mean, this transit-oriented zoning philosophy was to try to cut down on the number of cars that people have. And I don't have a list in front of me. I can probably find out, but I don't know how many units actually have more than one car and then have this problem. If it's more than 50, then that's really an individual choice. We'll try to help.
Would you know that if they were not buying a parking space? Like, would you know if they had 2 vehicles?
I suspect that the property manager, Tony Ferris, would know because he knows all the tenants personally. And we can, I can ask him if he knows. Let me address
How many spots are we going to get back when Weymouth opens up?
I haven't seen their final plan. It's a couple dozen spots. I don't want to say the exact number, but it was a pretty large parking lot. Some of it obviously has been taken over by the apartment house, but some of it was on Mr. DeLagis's land, which is private land anyhow. So we're going to get some more spots.
Okay.
I'll try to get a copy
Again,
of
I'm
that
going to
plan.
reiterate what I said in the beginning. I understand this is an amendment, and this is, where we have an issue, in my opinion, with the current zoning and parking. Like, I wanted to talk about that before we are going to take a vote on some new proposed zoning, and understanding the special permits come forward. But while you're both here, Attorney Marinelli and Mr. Katzen, I want to bring this up, and I hope we do further this conversation, and you, Ms. Santucci Rossi, especially meet with her on this. Because it is an issue, and I'd like to see, as we move forward with this, pictures are taken at night and on Saturdays and Fridays and on the weekends. Because if I'm a resident of Landing 53 and I have one parking, I can't ever have friends or family stay over. Like, I have relatives who come from out of town and they park in my driveway. I own a home, but we're not affording the residents of Landing 53 the same opportunity. So there's a lot of things at play here, and I think different times and things like that need to be looked at. But yeah, if you have a more detailed parking plan, that's what I want to look for when you move forward with this.
I think.
Yeah, and I think that we appreciate the comments, and I think that, we hear you loud and clear in terms of what we will be showing at the special permit hearing. I did want to clarify, though, that I don't think it's escaped anyone that, Landing 53, in all fairness to Josh, his company made a $50 million plus investment after the PWED grants and so forth, improve the sidewalks and improve the infrastructure down there. That was the entire intent of the PWED grants, was to then lure and bring about private investment, and it worked. And not without some pains and some struggles, as you point out, and the tension, as Josh says, between the commercial and the residential. But they did, pursuant to a public RFP process, were the successful bidder. They did buy, and they do own all of that property. They do maintain it at their expense. It's non-exclusive. There's nothing in the decision that prohibits Landing 53 having 12,000 commercial square footage, which is the biggest really new single owner right now. I don't know what the DeLagis online will be. That's a different town. But right now, the 3 uses proposed for, and 2 of them existing at Landing 53, certainly under the decision, there's nothing that precludes them from using the surface parking. They are a business in the Landing. And, if I had known, I only received notice of some, look at the parking today. So I went down and investigated, and I've sent you what the parking was today. That was real time. I don't know if we can go down and take pictures tonight, but there were, even in the 46 surface spaces, there were about 20 that were available right behind the building. So, we will have answers as to Christie's operational plan when we go before the planning board. I think Josh makes an excellent point that really, Councilor Hune, when you look at the table of uses and you look at what could go in the space by right, There are more impactful uses, significantly more impactful than Christie's, operation that is now using just a parking lot with 8 parking spaces. And by the way, the parking requirement was 1 per 500 before it was changed in June. So that would have, that increased it by 6 spaces. It doubled, and it was really only 6 for her type of use prior to June 2021. So we'll look at all of this, and we'll address all of it in the operational plan before the planning board. But as Josh points out, it is better to have the ability to say, here's some conditions we want with Christie's special permit use, rather than just putting in a more impactful use by right.
Thank you, Attorney Marinelli. Councilor Hume, are you good for now? Any further comments?
Thank you, Chairman Rinkus. I am good. Thank you for the time.
All right. Councilor Flaherty, I would turn it over to you.
Thank you. So I thought I was kind of clear on this, and then the parking conversations kind of muddled my thinking. So let me just make sure I understand it. As it seems to me like there are 3,000 square feet of commercial space right now that remain empty. And I don't think it's in Braintree's best interest to keep that retail space empty. So I think it's important to remember that our recommendation tonight, if we make one, is not on whether the VUCC should occupy this commercial space. All that's under consideration right now is whether the question of whether to allow a veterinary clinic to apply to the planning board for a special permit to occupy the space. And then at that time, the planning board would require an extensive review of the parking requirements of the facility in question, and then would make a decision on whether that would be permitted or not. Is that correct so far? Am I right so far?
Yes, that's correct. And we're just being transparent by telling you who the company is and what the transaction is right now.
Okay. So then my question really is there any reason to believe that a veterinary clinic, because it could be this one or it could be a different one, down the road, that a veterinary clinic would, by definition, in all cases, introduce a particular parking burden that would be over and above what another commercial use would create? Because that's all we're evaluating tonight, I think.
I believe I'm the best person to answer that, if that's okay if I step in.
Mr. Andrew.
To answer your question, Councilor Flaherty, not really. We're open 7 days a week. So our parking demands would probably be greater than the majority of veterinary clinics. And again, we use very little spaces where we're at right now. We operate mainly as a drop-off clinic, and clients tend to like that. It was a change during COVID, but clients seem to like the ability to drop their pets off, go get their nails done, go get a drink, go have dinner, which again, I think would be a valid, use in that area. In short, I don't believe so. And again, there's not a ton of veterinarians in the state of Massachusetts. You have to be a veterinarian to open a clinic. Given that there's mine and another one right up the street, it would be unlikely that somebody else would apply. I don't want to get into our lease details, but if we were to move forward, I do plan to have a long-term relationship with Josh. He actually leases another space to me, so we've known each other for a long time. My clinic in Plymouth is in one of his spaces. Does that answer your question?
I mean, what I hear you saying is that your particular clinic doesn't make a great demand on parking in the area. I guess I don't know comparatively, like how that would look if you compared it to some other commercial use.
If you compared a veterinary clinic to, say, a nail salon or a grooming facility or something like that, is that your question?
Certainly, those are examples of things that might go there. There's probably a lot of things that are allowed by right as well.
I mean, I think the question ultimately, and I don't want to paraphrase here, but it seems like the question ultimately is we have 3,000 square feet of space to go there, and there's a lot that's allowed by right. and the parking is an issue, it seems like having a known there with a very little parking demand, a known very little parking demand seems a better choice than having an unknown go in that has a much higher parking demand. And again, it gives you the opportunity for the planning board to really dig into the planning requirements and requires our side to really come up with an answer for you. And I think these are great questions. I can understand that as a community, there's a lot of concerns there. And we're more than happy to work with you guys to get those resolved.
Okay, well, that's my basic question. And anybody else who has a thought on that and wants to weigh in if there's more to add, then add it. But otherwise, I'm okay.
Thank you, Councilor Flaherty. Turning to Councilor Ryan.
Thank you, Councilor Ringus. I think it's very important. We have a vacant space, commercial space. We want to attract small businesses to Braintree. I think no matter what, we would want a business to go in this space. So I think, it's like 6 of one and half dozen of another, how much parking that's going to attract a business that has the right to go there now versus this business. I'm going to support this. It can be vetted at the planning board. Hopefully they'll come up with some improvements to the parking situation down there. I don't think we're hanging the entire parking space that we should look at and put this.
Thank you, Councilor Ryan. I have recognized everyone for the first time. I will just turn it, Councilor Hume, or Councilor Flaherty, anything you wanted to add before I sort of add any of my comments? Okay, thank you. I think that was a very thorough conversation, and I appreciate everyone's contributions to it. I think we are elected officials, and we respond to the residents. Obviously, Councilor Hume is very familiar with the East Braintree side of things from where she lives in the district she's represented. So I appreciate that, and I think we've all appreciated over the years being contacted by residents and issues that they've seen in the landing in prior years or in current years. It seems like there's still some folks that are disappointed with the parking situation. But I do think it's important to separate the roles of what we're looking at currently. And I think Councilor Flaherty sort of hit it on the head when she said, we are looking at this tonight, from tonight's perspective as members of the Ordinance and Rules Subcommittee, as a change to policy and changing what use might be allowed across a spectrum of things in a BWLD district. We're not specifically necessarily, even though it's part of the conversation and the folks are here, so we kind of know what's being proposed to go there and who are the folks that are proposing it to be there. But as a whole, we already have this existing space of at least 3,000 square feet that needs to be filled by a business. And the idea was that at some point it would be filled by a business. And there are various uses by right that already exist in the BWLD that might draw more traffic to the area, whether it be a coffee shop, whether it be a nail salon, whether it be a general medical, whatever it might be. So all we're doing is opening this up to something else. And I think the council's already taken a role, I believe back in June, where we allowed sort of some grooming. We changed zoning so that an animal grooming company could go into certain spaces. So I think I'm mindful of residents. I've been very involved with various zoning issues over the last couple of years, having been on Ordinance and Rules basically the entirety of my time on the council. And we've had some very sort of contentious zoning issues that have come before us. But it's important, I think, to create that separation. There is a process by which the town will vet out what will go there. And that is to that special permit process, and that is to the planning board. So, whether Ms. DeAndrea and Mr. Kotzen are able to work with the planning board to establish the parking that is needed, and whether counselors weigh in on that at some point. I do think that there is some issues with parking there. I know there are. But I think it's important that we separate that we have this space. The idea was to fill this space. Something can go in there. And I think, like Councilor Ryan sort of alluded to, what is it going to be? I see this as the type of thing that is not going to create as much traffic as some other things, or create as much congestion as some other businesses that might go there. So ultimately, I am supportive of this proposal. But with that said, obviously, I expect the planning board through their permitting process to work on this. And I would hope that Mr. Katzen and Attorney Marinelli work with our planning board and our planning department, especially to Ms. Santucci-Rossi, because it seems like there is some conversation that still has to occur. And I think some improvements that can be made in that parking. And I think Ms. Santucci-Rossi threw out a couple of comments about, and I would tend to agree with her, that some of the way we've calculated some of these spaces, it just doesn't make a ton of sense. But on that same token, I don't necessarily think that's my purview to look at that tonight. My purview tonight is to look at this from solely a policy zoning perspective. But I would hope that this conversation continues past this meeting, and that some of these issues are addressed in the future, because they do mean a great deal to our residents and to our businesses. So ultimately, I would be supportive of this tonight, but I do want those things to be addressed at some point. Any further comments or questions from members of the subcommittee? Seeing none, do I have a motion from any of the subcommittee members or the O&R members as to this proposal?
I do have a motion. As I said earlier, I am supportive of the amendment. It was the issues getting up to this point and taking care of the current zoning and parking. So I look forward to further discussion. So with that, I motion to approve the zoning petition amendment to the table of principal use, the use table, section 135-601, Braintree zoning ordinance, yes, to change principal use category, the animal clinic or hospital, from N to SP in the Braintree Weymouth Landing District, the BWLD.
Second.
I have a motion from Councilor Hume. Thank you, Councilor Hume. I have a second by Councilor Ryan. Clerk Semino, could I have a roll call vote?
Certainly. And I just want to reiterate, it was for favorable recommendation to the full council.
Yes.
Councilor Ringus,
Aye.
Councilor Hume,
Aye.
Councilor Flaherty,
Hi.
Councilor Ryan,
Aye.
4 in favor, 0 opposed.
And that is unanimous. Thank you to Attorney Marinelli, to Mr. Katzen, to Ms. DeAndrea for your presence here tonight. Thank you to Ms. Santucci-Rossi for your sort of weighing in from the planning perspective. Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
With that said,
Thank you all.
feel free to sign
Thank
off.
you for your, thank you very much for your valuable input, which we will take heed of. Thank you.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Good night, everyone. Thank you so much.
All right. With that said, we're moving on to the next item on our agenda, which is 00622, Council President, Town Council rules, or taking up any action relative thereto. This comes up after the start of a new legislative session pursuant to Rule 61 of the Town Council rules, adoption of rules. The rules are to be reviewed and adopted within 90 days after the first council meeting in every even year. So again, tying into sort of our new legislative session. I would note that myself and Councilor Flaherty were on ordinance and rules just about 2 years ago, before COVID became a thing, and began engaged in the review of the council rules at that time. And it was myself, Councilor Flaherty, Councilor Mackin, and Councilor Shasha. And I would say that the review that we did of those rules at that time was quite thorough. I would say it was probably the most thorough review that was ever done of the rules, to the point that we were adding in commas and semicolons. We went through, there was some rules that had been present that made a lot of sense, but the titles associated with them did not match up to what the paragraphs below them said. We had rules that had two very nice paragraphs, but again, the title didn't match the second paragraph. We had other rules in here that matched the form of resolutions as opposed to plain language rules. So I think we did go through, we did create a very thorough sort of review and ended up with 65 rules that we sort of moved on to the full council, and the full council eventually accepted. But again, part of the process is to look at these every 2 years. Before we go too deep into this, has each member of the Ordinance and Rules Subcommittee had an opportunity to review the rules as they currently stand? Okay. So the first thing I would actually turn to, because I know President Borica has been with us all night. She did have a proposal as to a certain rule that she wanted to see amended. So with the will of the subcommittee, I would turn to President Borica as to the amendment she would like to see.
Thank you, Chairman Ringus, and thank you all for having me tonight. Very interesting. I'm glad I was able to join for the entire meeting. So in my review of the rules, and also at the beginning of my tenure, looking at the committee assignments, it occurred to me the council does not have any single committee that addresses issues of sustainability and the environment, which felt like a gap to me. And rather than form a new committee, again, looking through the committees that we have, my recommendation would be to amend the guidelines for the Community Planning Committee, since that sort of touches a broad swath of the entire town. I did speak also to Councilor Maglio, who is the chairwoman of the Community Planning Committee, about this, to make sure she was comfortable with the change. And I think I've spoken to several of you ahead of this meeting as well. And thank you for your guidance to Chairman Ringus to bring this up in a formal setting. So with that, I don't want to belabor it. You have it all in front of you, but happy to enter into a discussion or answer any questions or concerns that anybody has about this change. And of course, appreciate your support.
Thank you, President Borica. I think I would just note that for those watching at home or watching later, Rule 38 basically deals with our standing committees and basically describes titles what those committees are, how many members they consist of. Those are ultimately all appointed by the president. And then there are guidelines that are presented for consideration by each committee on what those committees look to. And I think President Borica correctly noted that none of these committees technically dealt with issues of sustainability and the environment. In reviewing the committees that we currently have, I agree that it would make most sense or fits nicely into the objectives of the Community Planning Committee. Currently under Rule 38, the Community Planning Committee may consider and report upon all matters relating to short-term planning and community renewal projects, as well as long-term community planning and visioning. And that was passed in the council back in April of 2017, was I believe when that committee was first added to the town council rules. What President Borica is proposing is that we add a phrase onto the end of that, so where it ends, as well as long-term community planning and visioning, and issues of sustainability and the environment. And again, my sort of reading of this is that is a perfect place for it to go. I think it ties nicely into what the Community Planning Committee does. And it's all obviously sustainability and the environment is something we have to be mindful of as we move forward. We've already briefly touched on it tonight with how that impacts the plastic bag issues. But I think 100% it is something that the council and the town needs to be mindful of. And I think this is a great place to do it. I always say when you consider the rules, you always kind of put faceless people into the positions because you don't know who's going to be serving on them in 2 years. But I think we know currently who the chair of that board is, and I know that Councilor Maglio is one person who could definitely address and work towards some of these issues of sustainability in the environment. So I think she's the perfect person to sort of move that committee forward in that direction. So it's definitely something I would be supportive of. I didn't know if any other of the members wanted to first weigh in specifically on this amendment. Seeing none. Okay, moving on from that. Thank you, President Bowrecker, for that.
Thank you. Chairman Ringus, I'm sorry. And I am so grateful you're all parents. I have to go pick up my son at the high school. So I'm happy to take any other questions or I'll be back. Do you need me though?
I think we're good. We hope to be done before you get back.
Okay.
I think I think myself and Council Flaherty had this conversation the other night. If you are late, they will never remember when you were on time, but they will 100% know every time you are late. So I would feel free.
Thank you. And thank you all very much. And again, fully you agree. And I really appreciate your support and camaraderie on the council in general. So, okay.
With that said, having specifically just looked at Rule 38, do any members of ONR want to have any other issues within the town council rules that they wish to address? Councilor Flaherty.
Thank you. I think I am especially proud of the work that we did on the rules in the last term. It was extensive, but I don't think that we got everything right. And one of the things I think we need to revisit is Rule 8, which calls for the power of the president to appoint members of council to committees to be subject to Rule 3, which is permits it to be appealed by the council, by the full council at any time. I think that this rule, and we should remember that the Ordinance and Rules Committee was composed of 3 people who had never been on any council before, and 1 person who had. So, it's not surprising to me that we didn't get every single thing right. But when you compare that rule to the way that other bodies handle the same kind of problem, it's highly irregular. I think it's fair and right for an individual who is elected as the council president to have the power necessary to run the council smoothly, and allowing the committees to be continually revised by the full council introduces the potential for a really contentious political scrum, possibly. And we've been fortunate that it hasn't happened, and maybe it never would, but I don't think it's wise to allow the possibility for it. So that is my proposal, that we remove the amendment that we made to Rule 8, just simply striking where it says appointments are subject to Rule 3.
And before we turn to other members, Councilor Flaherty, because I think it might be easier if we sort of address, is that the only issue that you have currently, or is there other rules that you want to just look at?
That is the only rule that I am going to propose a change to.
Thank you, Councilor Flaherty. Any comments on that or other rules that members wanted to look at? Councilor Hume.
Thank you, Chairman Ringus. I will support Councilor Flaherty's amendment. I also have a comment and a question. Comment that I would agree with Chairman Ringus that these rules were in, I think, both mine and Chairman Ringus's roles in an elected office, both school committee and council. These have been the most thorough review of the rules 2 years ago. And I remember it kept getting delayed with COVID and in person and wanting to be in person so we could all discuss them fully as a committee. So I know when it was brought about, a lot of the work and time and effort that was done, I do appreciate all those who did that. And it was an extensive review, more extensive than has ever been done from what I see. So that's my comment. My question, and I'll pose this to you, Chairman Ringus, and Councilor Flaherty, Chairman Ringus, if you wish to. Was there discussion to eliminate some, just for recalling. I think it was talked about, but none of the committees were eliminated. Like, is that something people want to look at, or like, you know, because I wasn't in the detailed discussions of ordinance and rules, like, I'll defer to you on how you want to,
If I could, yeah, 100%. That was something that came up, and obviously it's a discussion that I think many of us have had kind of offline or looked at with residents. There are again, kind of goes to Rule 38. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We have, I believe, 10 off the top of my head, 10 committees. Some of those meet often. Ways and Means, Ordinance and Rules, Public Works. Those meet personnel issues. Those meet often, and they have a very robust agenda that they attend to. We see other ones, education and library. You know, there's a library board of trustees, and there is obviously a school committee. And a lot of the issues that might deal with education and library, and this is just my personal opinion, generally get dealt with through Ways and Means because it's some sort of output of money. So there hasn't been a lot of things you see specifically referred to education or library. Same thing with, I think, you know, some of the other public parks. We have that's addressed through the mayor's office, and a lot of times, again, it might be about CPA money or funding, and a lot of times it goes through Ways and Means. So there are committees that seem like they don't meet at all. I think, if I remember right, one of the things we thought it would behoove us to address that, not necessarily through the rules, but through a discussion with the council and with the council president, because although the rules set the standing committees, in essence, we would be taking positions away from folks, and we would be sort of taking away appointments that have been made after the legislative session began by eliminating them through the rules. And my feeling was it would be a better proposal if we looked at this at the full council, perhaps as a president's perspective type of thing, as opposed to us eliminating committees through looking at the town council rules. And that was just my personal opinion, that it would be better done through the 9 of us as a whole, as opposed to saying, hey, we're going to kill a committee through the rulemaking process.
Mm-hmm.
And Council Flaherty, I didn't know if you wanted to add in on that.
No, not really. It's complicated. You know, all the points that you made are valid.
Yep.
If you remove a committee after someone's been appointed, then you're taking something away from them. But at the same time, we keep adding committees and they don't all meet. It seems like maybe some of them could be compressed together, but I don't know if if a rules review is really the right way of going about it, but we don't really have a scaffolding, a path for that.
Again, I would just say, I don't think the review of the rules is the best place to do it. I would, Councilor Hume, be 100% willing to sponsor some sort of thing to the full council that we could co-sponsor, that I think that there should be a broader look taken at what sort of standing committees continue to exist.
Yeah, I do agree with that and absolutely support that, because it has been something that's been talked about, and for the reasons you both, very valid points. It's not to take something away that's not important, because all of these are important. But, and Councilor Flaherty, to your point, like maybe we do consolidate some of these, but I think we do absolutely need to take a broader look at these. So we're doing all these committees justice, and to the departments that, we would be supporting and having a discussion with. I've struggled the education and library and parks that you mentioned. Yes, they do have other committees and means of supporting that, but without some of these subcommittees, you might not always get out into the parks and looking at the parks and seeing what, and then being an advocate for them, or, coming budget season, maybe if you advocate more for, that's what we do have the authority to do, is to advocate for certain things within the budget and things like that. We can't change the budget, as you all know, but yeah, no, I agree with you, Chairman Ringus.
Let's do that.
Any other rules that you wanted to look at, Counselor Hume?
I am good with everything else, honestly, because I followed along when you were doing the reviews and they, like I said, and I truly mean that, they were, you know, as you said, I remember a comma was removed, a paragraph was changed, a title was changed. So very, very extensive review. And other than what Counselor Flaherty had her change, I'm good with everything else. Thank you.
Counselor Ryan, anything you'd like to see addressed?
I am good. I just want to commend Council Flaherty. I think that's a great suggestion that she has. So I'm all set.
So I think what'll happen is, Counselor Hume, you could make, if in a moment, could make the motion to accept the rules. I believe there's a lot of support here for, with the amendment to Rule 8, striking appointments are subject to Rule 3, appeals from the decision of the president. I am, and I note that, opposed to that change, but I'm not going to hold up the whole process based on that one change. I've always thought I was that no person should ever have absolute power in anything. There should always be some sort of appealability or ability to challenge that. But I understand the perspective that it could create a political scrum. So I will be supportive of the document, but Clerk Semino, when we do the motion, I will say I'm supportive of the document with the exception of the amendment to Rule 8. So we'll have a division, just a slight division there. Councilor Hume, did you want to make that motion unless anyone else had anything further to add?
Sure, I will make the motion to adopt the town council rules as amended, as stated with the amendment to Rule 8 as it pertains to Rule 3, the appeals from the decision of the president. Sue, is that sufficient?
That's perfect.
Oh, yes, okay. On item 00622.
I have a motion from Councilor Hume as proposed with that amendment to Rule 8. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second from Councilor Flaherty. Clerk Semino, can I have a roll call vote?
So we doing them separate? Rule
Well,
8
yeah,
and
why
Rule
don't you
38?
address the other three first, and then I'll vote last. No, we're not going to do each rule. We're going to just the package.
Okay, so we also had the amendment for Rule 38.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. And Councilor Hume, would you also add in the addition?
And I will amend hold on, let me it's Rule 38, right?
Rule 38.
And also the motion to amend Rule 38
Community planning.
to recommend to the full council that the full council review the committees. Good enough?
No, that this is the one presented by President Barica.
Oh, geez, right.
So this
Okay,
is
so I'll
just
go
for
first.
the amendment to the
All right.
Community Planning Committee.
So we're just doing the one amendment. Are we voting this all in total? No. Okay.
So I think if I could, I think
Yeah.
the motion would be to accept the Braintree Town Council rules as proposed with amendments to Rule 8 committee appointments,
Yeah.
striking language, appointments are subject to Rule 3, appeals from decision of the president, and also an amendment to Rule 38, adding into the Community Planning Committee the distinct issue of and issues of sustainability and the environment.
So moved.
So I have a motion by
Second.
Councilor Hume, a second by Councilor Flaherty still.
Yes, second.
Clerk Semino, roll call vote. We got that done.
Thank you. Councilor Ringus.
Chairman.
I will vote no as to the proposal with the exception of Rule 8. So I'll vote yes to the package with the exception I vote no to the amendment to Rule 8.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think you can do that.
You
It's one
can't do that.
motion.
It's one motion on the
Can anybody
table.
hear me?
We
can
can
hear
hear
you
you
now.
hear
now.
me? Yeah.
Can't do that.
All right, so
can't
I
do
will
that.
vote no then. Keep it
Okay.
easy.
That makes sense.
You want to take these motions separately?
No, it's
You can't do that because the whole, never mind.
whole
Can't
thing.
do
I'll
that.
just vote no and I'll explain it at the full.
Okay, yep, that works.
Okay. So Chair Ringus is now Counselor Hume,
Aye.
Counselor Flaherty,
Aye.
Counselor Ryan.
Aye.
That's 3 in favor, 1 opposed.
And that is a 3-1, and that passes for a proposal to the full council.
Mhm.
President Borica has rejoined us. I don't think you could have stayed under the speed limit and got to the high school and back, but
I
That's
stayed on the
safe,
speed
right?
limit for the record.
all right. With that said, though, you made it just in time for our adjournment.
There's a motion to adjourn. Oh, did I jump the gun? Sorry.
That's fine. We have a motion to adjourn from Councilor Hume. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Councilor Ryan. Clerk Semino, roll call vote.
Counselor Ringus,
Aye.
Counselor Hume,
Aye.
Counselor Flaherty,
Aye.
and Counselor Ryan.
Aye.
4 in favor, 0 opposed.
And that is unanimous. Thank you, everyone, for your work tonight.
Good night, all.
Night,
Thank
everybody.
you.